Okay, today on this series on designing a custom modern home, we're going to be continuing into the schematic design phase. Schematic design can be thought of as the rough draft of the design. And this schematic design work, it gets refined over time through meetings with the client and through various explorations on both a large scale and then down to a detail scale. And these schematic design meetings, they happen after the client and I have already discussed their needs and their wants and their goals for the project and the outcome that they want to achieve once the project is built. We have already discussed site analysis, we have already discussed performance programming, and we've already reviewed the conceptual sketches that have led us up to this point. And most importantly, we are in agreement with the direction that we're taking with the project. So when I'm working on the early analysis phases and the conceptual phases of a project, I really like to work with hand sketching and modeling. And by using hand drawings, it allows me to have the ideas flow through me much quicker and much looser. And it allows me to explore things that I might not consider if I jumped right into the computer. But we get to a certain point, right? We get to a certain point where we need to start bringing it into the computer. We need to actually draw the rooms in the correct sizes and start looking at where windows will be placed and the sizes of windows and other openings and the roof structure and the roof form. And really that comes into play during the schematic design phase. One of the first things I like to do is start by blocking out and massing the volumes and setting the general sizes for the volumes for the rooms. And now this doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm not really focused on where the windows will be and where the doors will be. I just want to start off very general and make sure that the scale of the house and the massing and the proportions are where they need to be and they relate to the conceptual design sketches that I've already reviewed with the client. As I work through the initial massing study, I will start to add some detail though. So here's an example where I'm looking at the end wall of the house, which looks down the hill, down to the pond. And when I first draw this wall of glass, I'm not really going to be worried about the spacing of the mullions or the material or color of the mullions. I don't need it to be perfect yet. I just need it to represent a big wall of glass because that's what it's going to eventually be. And one of the reasons, even though I'm starting to add detail, I'm not going overboard with the detail because I want to see how the rest of the design and the rest of the house sort of shapes up as I'm putting it into the computer. And I want to see where the design takes me before I start making those small scale decisions. And you know, with this wall of glass, I might eventually align the horizontal mullions with the lower roof level, or I might change the material based upon the material of the siding and the color of the siding. But like I said, it's just a little bit easier for me to wait on those decisions until the model and the design is a little further along. I might also start adding some of the exterior materials if I know what they're going to be, such as what I'm doing here with the inner edge of that wall surrounding the glass opening. I know that I want that wall to be an exposed wood siding, so I can start to show that even in these early stages of bringing the project into the computer. And then one of the things I like to do when I get the computer drawing up to a certain point, I like to export it and go back to the hand sketching, either using an app like Morpholio Trace or Procreate, or even just printing it out and using trace paper. And then what I like to do is at scale, I like to start sketching in the walls and the doors where I think they're going to be. And I've sort of known where they're going to be through the conceptual work, but now that I have sort of the massing and the main outline of the floor plan into the computer, I can now start to add those interior partitions and the walls and the doors and study the circulation of the space a little bit further with my hand before going back into the computer. When I'm working through schematic design, and even when I start working in the computer, I always like to continue my sketching because it allows me to think a little clearer rather than trying to work out all these spaces in the computer. You don't need to have every decision made before you start working in the computer, but for me, it always is a little bit better to work quickly through these sketches and lay out the spaces, and that way once I get into the computer it goes a little bit smoother. So here we're looking at sort of the main living volume, and right over here you would find the main entry into the home. This is where your guests are going to come in. This is going to be your main front door. Off to the side here, this is going to be sort of that entrance corridor from the garage. Now this extends out this way, and the primary suite's going to be right here, but this corridor right here is going to be a light filtered corridor that leads from the garage space that's off to the side over into this main entry vestibule. I always like to, and some people don't like this, but I always like to have some little tease of a view. Once you enter in, I want to be able to see something, right? And you don't want the big payoff right away, right? You want some anticipation. But I always like to have at least a little bit of a view when you walk in and some light sort of coming from the other side. So out this back here is going to be a courtyard area between the main volume and the home office volume, which is off to the side. Once you walk through the front door, you're getting a glimpse of that, and that could even be a slider door or a French door that goes out to that spot. It's giving you a little bit of a tease of the view. The primary suite, while I don't necessarily love having the primary suite sort of off the entry, I do want it separate from the main living volume, right? We want a little bit of a buffer, a noise buffer, a space buffer, and maybe something can be done, in here where you can still have that view, you can still have that access to the back, but that closes off the primary suite a little bit. Or maybe the entry to the primary suite is around the corner off of this light-filled hallway. Maybe that's the better plan. So anyways, once you come in either from the main entry or from the garage, you have these stairs here, and the stairs can be, this wall can be something that's accentuated, something to call out the stairs. You turn the corner, you have a coat closet. You want to set up, I always like to set up these sort of intermediate zones, right? So maybe you're going to go from a compressed space to a little bit more of an open space. Then you have to walk through a little compressed space again before you get to the main part of the living room. So that's a good place for a coat closet. And then having a guest toilet or a powder room, you want it somewhere near the main entertaining areas. You want it somewhere near the main entrance, but you don't want to have it visible. You don't want to have the smells the first thing you see when you walk in. You want your guests and people using that bathroom to have a little bit of a privacy. So what I've done here is off of this entry corridor, I pulled in another little corridor and tucked the toilet room in around that corridor. And that way, people, when they're walking in and out of the toilet, there's no one looking at them, and it's got a buffer on all sides. And this also allows where these walls sort of penetrate and hit the outside walls, that allows me to put like a floor to ceiling glass and sort of flood this area with some natural light. The next space over here is the pantry, and the pantry can be accessed from two sides. Another thing that's great about it is it's not only do you want it convenient to the kitchen, but also convenient to the entry. So if you're coming in from the main entry or you're coming in from the garage, the pantry space is sort of right there. It allows you to bring your groceries in, unload them, put them away, and you're not having to walk an extra distance. Then you get into the sort of kitchen, living room, dining area. The kitchen, you can see here this dotted line that separates sort of this volume from this volume. If you remember from the schematic model that we built, this is sort of a lower volume, and then up here you have clear story windows that put some natural light in. Now, we are going to have a couple of bedrooms upstairs, and so what I usually like to do with that, and I'll probably pull this line down somewhere along that lines where those second floor bedrooms will be up in that space there, and then that allows the kitchen ceiling to be a little bit lower and this living room ceiling to be a little bit higher. And so what we have here is we have a big long island that's facing out to the main views. This is going to be a big, huge, tall glass wall that's looking down to that pond. Then down here in the corner, the client has a large family. They have large get-togethers and big family meals. So we have this long 10-foot table. Maybe it's going to be a 12-foot table. But we want to be able to sit a lot of people. We want to be able to have a view from here looking out to that pond that's down there. Anytime I have walls sort of intersecting like that, it's an opportunity to express that joint between the two materials. And one thing that I'm thinking is when you come through the front door and you turn that corner and you're looking down, you're going to want to be able to see out into something. Just like you want to see out here, you turn this corner and you have a view that's terminating there. Now the big payoff, again, the big payoff is when you get to this space and you have this wall of glass. But again, you want to be able to have a little glimpse out. And maybe this isn't a window. Maybe that's a door that's going out to the deck that's over here or the patio. Then down here, tucked behind the refrigerator and the freezer is the breakfast nook. Now I made the breakfast nook almost like its own separate room. This space is going to be a quiet space. It's going to be a place where you can sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee. Remember, from the conceptual design, the client, one of the people living in this home wants to wake up very early and they want to enjoy a cup of coffee in the sunshine. Now, the sun rises over in this direction. So again, it's going to get flooded with natural light into here. And then they'll also have views down to the pond. So this breakfast area is going to be a nice little spot. And then think, even when you have large family meals, the adults can be over here and the kids can be in here. They can make some noise because it's all closed off and the adults can have their own conversation. So again, it allows you some privacy. It allows you to have that sort of separate area. Over in the living room, we have a door out. We'll have a slider door out this direction. Again, you can exit to the deck here. You can exit to the courtyard there. Fireplace with plenty of seating around it. And I think that's a pretty good layout for this main level. Now, coming up with a design like this is an iterative process, and we've explored it conceptually. I've started drawing it in the computer. I started sketching. What you want to do is you want to keep exploring these different ideas. So working back and forth between computer drawings and hand sketching and digital sketching and model building allows you to explore different parts of the designs at sort of different speeds and different intervals. And that might bring about something that you never thought of before if you were just strictly putting the blinders on and working in the computer. And even after working through a conceptual design and a massing study, you think you might know what the floor plan layout's going to be, but you can easily waste time trying to make it all work in the computer. But by changing the way you work, it will activate different parts of your brain differently, and it allows you to see differently. And the end result is a much better layout, a much better design for my clients, and a design that doesn't look forced. So then what I like to do is, after I have the massing of the house in the computer, and then I work through another iteration of hand sketching, I go back into the computer and I start to draw that interior floor plan layout. And now, this is always a debate in architecture. Do you design the floor plan first or the exterior elevations first, or do you work with the sectional qualities first? And the correct answer is you work on all of those at the same time. But once I get to the point where the massing is roughed in and I have those early sketches done, I sort of like to get the plan organization down first. Now, with each wall that I draw and with each space that I create, I am thinking of those sectional qualities and the elevation qualities and the perspective qualities in my head, and I know what those will look like even while working on the plan view. But to me, I like to get that floor plan done and working the way that I want based upon the sizes of the furniture, based upon the circulation space that you need, based upon the room that you need around the kitchen. And I like to make those work first rather than exploring something else and then finding out that the floor plan doesn't quite fit together. Either way, you have to continue to edit, and you have to continue to iterate, and you have to continue to come up with different options and refine those options until everything comes together. While the form of the house was initially generated through analysis, as I was working on the design and the massing of the floor plan and the articulation in the massing, the word cascading kept running through my mind. And as I was panning and rotating around the 3D model and refining that model, it became clear to me that there was a resemblance to the rock structures found in Acadia National Park. And once this became clear, I found myself reflecting on a trip that my family took to the park in 2022 and sitting out on the rock, and I found myself thinking about the qualities that I felt taking in the environment. And the staggering of the roof forms that I was coming up with on this house really reminded me of those natural forms of the rock that I saw there. So I always feel that the best designs are a combination of a rigorous analysis and an abstract representation. And for this project, while these cascading rock volumes were not a direct reference as I was initially designing the house, that experience of being out there and being aware of the qualities of the space and the feelings of that space does have an impact. And so I like to name each of my projects, and from here on out, this house is going to be known as the Cascade House. I'm always inspired by nature, from taking the time to quietly sit and reflect on the natural world, and then try to not just replicate it, but if you can find an abstract relationship, to me that just strengthens the overall quality of the design. So after I've got the plan worked out and the massing worked out and that computer model looking the way that I want it to look, the next thing I start to work on is the exterior materials. And while I'm not making final selections at this point, I'm trying to convey a sense of what those exterior materials and what those exterior colors could be. And that way I can show the homeowner and get their reactions and then refine from there. So I like to try to limit the amount of different materials and colors that I'm using. And for this project, I'm mainly working with a dark black siding for the larger volumes, and then a rich wood texture for some of the smaller spaces and the accents. And then there's some glass and some stone, and maybe even possibly some zinc panels at a few key accent places around the exterior. To me, I think when you have too many materials and too many colors, it gets confusing. I like to have things very simple, 2 or 3 exterior material colors at the most, accentuate these moments in the design with using materials and exploring the connection point between those 2 different materials. That makes for some really great moments in architecture. To help my clients be able to visualize what their house is going to look like, even at this schematic design level, I like to model the site, and I might like to model the environment and the context, even at this early stage. And so that means the topography of the land, that means the trees and the shrubs, and the water, if there's water. We have the pond on this project. And so I work on the grading, and I add in the roads and the driveways and the walkways and then the trees. What I'm showing here may not reflect the final landscape design, but it at least allows the homeowner to better understand what they're looking at. By putting it into the context of the landscape, they're able to visualize themselves in the house or walking around the house, more so than if it was just a computer model of a 3D mass that was just floating in space. Then from there, I'm able to create the visuals which will be used in the client meeting, and these will include floor plans and exterior elevations, as well as some renderings and even some videos. And while the images at this point in time that I'm showing here may look like a finished product, the design is still very much in progress, and there is room for feedback and changes and further explorations. And so even while I'm exporting these images and getting ready for this client design meeting, I can see things that need further refinement. I can see things that just aren't working perfectly. But the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to bring the design up to a certain level and then sit around the table with your client, get their feedback, and have that collaboration, because the collaboration back and forth and the feedback that you get is going to make the project so much better than if I just sat there by myself in my studio and brought it to a 100% completion level. So we're not going to wait till everything's perfect to have that design meeting with the clients. And then following the meeting, I'm going to make further changes to the design, further changes to the floor plan, further changes to the exterior. And we're going to keep on going about that process of having a design meeting and then making further refinements and going back and forth until we have the design to a point where the client is satisfied. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little peek into the schematic design process, and stay tuned as this project continues to be developed. Thank you.